hamburger steaks. Some of us will be covering them with mushroom gravy and mushrooms and onions. Some of us will be using them like a hamburger. Come on over here and check out what Michael's got cooking. Oh yeah, that's a dump cake. Pineapple.
Let it go just a little bit longer.
Yeah. Good stuff. Rotate. Man. Alright. You shut her off.
Backs up and we're all just looking at him. He's like,
He's just looking at you. Sitting there pooping right in front of
gives us
everybody.
like the little horse Gump wave.
Didn't think anything of it. Then there was the time that we were at, what's it called? Keystone Lake. And his mom had bought him a brand new coat. And it was cold. It was a February camp out, I think.
That was all one.
That's right. That was the same one.
Oh, like.
Call Lake, yeah.
And they burned the grass in there.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, they do that. But anyway, he goes off into the brush. And somebody said, don't get your new coat dirty. He's literally gone 3 minutes, comes back. He's completely covered in black soot head to toe. Like, I'm pretty sure he even got his armpits covered.
How do you do that?
And one of us said, dang it, Gabe, you're not supposed to, we told you not to do that. I didn't. Yes, you did. It's all over you. No, it's not. He sat there and covered in black soot. He had it all over his face, all over his hands, arguing with us. He claimed that he didn't have soot on him. It was something. Anyway, well, we better get back to our, what were we talking about that we decided?
Whether they're going to eat us.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to that whole, how much wildlife, wild game is around for them to take. And I'm sure that, they can't overpopulate an area. And maybe they've just taken too many animals. I mean, we've been here, this is the second day, and we have not seen but no deer. I mean, we see some tracks here and there, but in a place like this, we should see tons of deer. And if we were back home, we would be seeing tons of deer, but we're not seeing them. If we were in Black Mesa, we would see tons of deer. But here we are, Southeastern Oklahoma, National Forest, no.
Well,
The only thing we've seen is those hogs.
and they decimate the deer population because they eat babies.
Well, they're...
And that's why they want to kill them so bad. Get rid of them.
Well, but anyway, I guess, the only story that I know of where they've been documented as eating people was that one where was that the Choctaw Nation? 1858?
Might have been.
I want to say it was either the Creek or the Choctaw. It was the Choctaw. I know it was Choctaw. Anyway, they tell a story about these wild men that came in and were stealing children and women and taking them, and so the men came back and got on their horses and went to war. And there, there's a whole video. Well, actually, there's 2 or 3 YouTube videos with some slight variations in the story, but it's a cool story. Interesting end. But at the end of the day, could it happen? Yeah. I mean, you got to ask yourself, if you were starving and you somehow managed to kill a squatch, would you eat it? Well, people have been known to, times get tough, you know.
Well, if it was localized, okay. Oh, these one tribes tell a story, but you know what? It's all over. New Mexico and Arizona or somewhere. There's the reservation, and there's really nothing. A lot of sagebrush, but you know, there's kind of a hot spot in that area, and they say for generations, you know, don't go after dark because I don't want to say boogeyman, but that's not the term they use, but it's how we would translate it, you know.
Boogeyman, it's the... Are you talking about the Indian name, or are you talking about the people down in the south that call them the booger? The booger.
No,
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was,
Well,
but they all tell the story of, yeah, they'll come out, you know, close to their teepees or where they're at and make baby noises to get the women to come out.
Yep.
And to check.
There's been numerous accounts of people hearing their name called or hearing their dog's name being called from the woods, and the people go down there and check it out. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say that every time they do something like that, you know, it's a attempt to kill and eat someone. I think sometimes they're just mimicking you. You know, I know that I would want to keep my Sasquatch in my area well fed if I could. But then again, I wouldn't want to feed them directly, because then that's a whole different can of worms. But see, like this area right here, all right? Southeastern Oklahoma is known to basically have many Sasquatch. My guess is that they probably live in different family pods, different group pods, and they're all spread out over here. Now, like in northwestern Oklahoma, where we're from, they can roam anywhere they want to without getting into someone else's territory. But take like where we're at right now, they can't really go north, they can't really go south, they can't really go over into Arkansas. All these areas are pretty much staked out by other Sasquatch tribes. So, I mean, I say tribes, I don't know what to call them. I guess I would call them tribes. But I guess what I'm saying is as their population grows, as they breed, as they have children, and as all this is going on, they begin to tap into the food supplies harder and harder and harder. But yet, perhaps it's impossible for them to go outside of their range without being detected by other squatches and perhaps committing an offense against them by going in their territory. Maybe they end up going hungry and become malnourished and stuff. Maybe this is when they turn to going through people's trash cans or like digging in the, well, I don't think the Squatch that's digging in the dumpster over at Lucky Star Casino is, I don't think they're overpopulated. I think they've got all kinds of territory that they can roam. I think my guess is that's a small family unit living over there. But over here, I would say there's a lot more population of Squatches here. They probably have property lines kind of like we do. And unlike us, where we can sneak onto somebody else's property and not be noticed, it'd probably be impossible for them to go on another Squatch's property and not be noticed. So they're going to end up getting in people's food, or like last night, coming in and getting in our cooler. But we've got dump cake for them tonight. want to see them. I want to see them get the dump cake out of a Dutch oven without making noise. Man, he sounds like a squatch over there, doesn't he? The hairy man's over there. You done over there, Fox? There ain't no mouth to mouth around here. You better get yourself straightened up.
Well, I just ruined this little audio clip.
That's no biggie. It's real life. We'll just call these campfire conversations. You know, it's not all mocked up, made up. It's just what we talk about. Now, back to what we were talking about previously, though. I'm not sure if they sit out there and wait for us to go to bed and get all quiet and give us plenty of time and then come in, or whether they just happen to show up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe they're making their rounds, which is possible. We gotta invest in one of those straws. Wasn't I gonna make a piece of copper for that?
That would work.
It'd have to be hard drawn copper.
Well, Michael, what was we talking about while we were hiking? There was one subject that we were kind of touching base on. And
Do what?
Yeah, you said you were gonna enlighten me.
Yeah, we were, but I'm pretty tired. And I can't remember what it was.
Were you talking about how the big man's gonna jump out of those bushes that are
No,
on the side of the road?
no. Gosh, you remember, Michael, what it was?
I don't remember what.
Well, I want to bring up something. This whole Bobby versus Bob thing. You know, I'm going to say that regardless of what really happened, I think that, you know, when I was a young man, I killed a lot of stuff just to say I killed it. Now that I'm older, I wouldn't do that. And I mean, pretty much, for me to kill an animal nowadays, it has to be a nuisance animal, like a hog or a coyote, or it has to be something I'm going to eat. I kind of got over the whole killing stuff just for the sport. And when that whole incident occurred, Bob was a young man. And he's an old man now. And I think we all make mistakes. I mean, I'm not saying that he made a mistake there. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know if he was part of that Canadian crew or involved, or who knows the level of his involvement. But my point is don't you think that, I mean, I think people deserve a little bit of forgiveness. And I'm just saying that's even if he did do what he has been accused of doing. But I do not doubt for a minute that the government has these hit teams that go in. Now, I would like to know the specifics about why they go in and do it, but we're never going to get those answers. So,
You know, I can't remember what YouTube video it was, or even if it was that, but I guess they had called the sheriff because something was, in their yard or whatever, and within hours they had streets blocked off. It was out in the country, so the country roads blocked off, and containment units set up. They said it was almost like they were ready for that event to happen.
now, was this a dog man or was this a squatch?
I don't know what it was.
A lot of people will say that the government has a higher level of interest in the dog man, and that they actually monitor telephone conversations and stuff, and they monitor like sheriff stations, and I think like I think the game rangers are in on it.
Yeah.
I think they know. I think the game rangers know it all. They're like the first line of defense.
When did Dogman appearances? We all heard Sasquatch, but I'll be honest, I haven't heard about the Dogman things until the past 15 years. And
Well, me neither. That's kind of one of the things that got me started in all this is, my brother sent me a couple of links to some videos, and I thought they were funny, because the guy that was, I don't remember which one it was, but it was that one where the two guys were living in a dump in a cardboard box, and the guy said that the Sasquatch ate his friend, and I thought that was like the funniest thing I'd ever seen or heard. I don't remember which one. That might have been one of Brenton's ones, but I started listening to those podcasts while I was on my lunch break at school grading papers and stuff, and I found that some of them wasn't so funny, and some of them you could tell that they were normal people that had seen frightening things. And that's when I heard people start talking about Dogman. And after Googling Dogman, I quickly realized that I had seen one. I'd seen two. And I did not realize that Dogman was a thing. Me and my brother had just been calling it the wolf dog is what we'd called it up until that point. We didn't know what else to call it. But anyway, that deal is kind of, and this was like 2 years ago, that me and my brother were talking about it, because this whole cryptid thing, we'd been around it. We watched Boggy Creek and whatnot, but we really didn't know. And that was the same way with, with this my Dogman sighting. I knew I'd seen what I'd seen, but I didn't know there was a name for it, and I didn't know that it was common. To be truthful with you, I've spent a lot of time trying to convince myself that what I saw was a mutant dog or something, because the ones that I saw never got up and walked on two legs. They were just very big. So, well, the one was. The other one wasn't so big. But it had some unique characteristics, body characteristics that...
Well, I was thinking that, the government is in on them, and like you said earlier, that there was, during the Mount St. Helens fire, they went in and given medical treatment. And
Well, that was the Sasquatch.
yeah, so, we've heard Sasquatch stories and Sasquatch lore and Indian tales and stuff, but as far as I know, I haven't really looked into the Dogman thing that much, but it's something new. I'm wondering if if the reason
Wow.
why they're so into getting it quarantined and out of the way, I wonder if they decided they were going to do some, genetic testing or something
No,
on a Sasquatch.
they've been around longer than that.
They've been around longer than the American government.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know.
The First Nations people will tell you about it. And to be truthful with you, I think the First Nations people as a whole are partially responsible for there not being a whole lot known about these things. They know all about these dogmen, but they won't talk about it because
they don't. It's like a Wendigo type deal.
they don't talk about it. And
because you're inviting it.
They believe that you're empowering it and you're basically bringing it to you.
Conjuring it.
Yeah. And I respect that. I respect their beliefs. But I do believe that part of the reason why everybody's heard of Sasquatch but nobody's heard of the other one is because they don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And they, honestly, have been the keepers of that knowledge for a long time. And your average white people just call it a werewolf. But I think all the different Indian tribes, they have different names for them. And a lot of them have different opinions of what they're capable of and what they do. And of course, a lot of the different Indian tribes, they have differing opinions on Squatches too.
Yeah.
A lot of them believe that they're bad karma. A lot of them believe, hell, there's even certain tribes, I think up north, that they tell their children that back in the day that they used to trade with them.
Yeah.
And you think, well, what would a Squatch had to trade? And I'll tell you what they'd had to trade. I spent time thinking about that. Herbs, plants. They would know where all that is. Medicinal type herbs. But that's just my wild ramblings. Who better to ask where to find a certain plant than in somebody that lives out in the woods all the time?
Yeah. Well, the Indians did too, but I guess First Nations people, that's a better term, but
It's Indian.
they
Ow, that smoke.
I just think that Sasquatch is more in tuned on a higher level with creation and nature, and they're just more of an inner working of it. And
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they are. I mean, they're the masters of their environment. God, I wish I had $1 for every hide and seek champion of the world, social distancing champion of the world. That was funny, like the first 400 times I saw that on Facebook.
well, I think you do have to kind of approach it with some little bit of humor, not because it's a funny or serious or a subject not to take serious, but if you're just all just serious about it all the time, and people are gonna but if you make a joke or something about it, then people are more likely to kind of listen and just get that little bug in their ear about it.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Have you ever heard also of they were using for mines and mines and stuff like that. Have you ever heard that one?
They were using squatches?
Yeah.
No. No, I haven't heard that. I did hear the story of the red-headed giant that took out a whole squad.
Giant Candabar or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about a weird story.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty random. You know, they always say, like, the weirdest stories, they're true because they're so weird that they couldn't make something like that up. And that was a pretty weird story. But there is a historical reference for that, so could have been fabricated, of course. Everything could have been fabricated. We never know.
Oh, I know what we were talking about. We were talking about the humanoid skeletons and stuff they find, and like Lucy and prehistoric. They say it's man, and then we evolved. And I told Mike, I said, look, man, I've been to the Field Museum of Natural History and the Natural History in New York City, and they have these skeletons lined up against the wall, and above them they have this million years, and whatever, and then they have boom, then they put a human skeleton right next to a Neanderthal or one of those humanoids, and they said this is how we evolved. And you can look at it and see that they're different. Their rib cages are triangular. Their hands hang below their kneecaps. Their spine goes more in the back of their occipital lobe. They're different, And then science says, and then all these millions of years, and then boom, in 400,000 years, we have this, man, and there's like, if it was going to happen, there had to be more steps in the chain if that's what they're trying to push down your throat. And I think that they've always been here.
Well, I agree. A few years ago, we were always taught in school that the Neanderthals were killed out by the Homo sapiens, and they were basically wiped out. And everybody believed it. Made sense. Well, they're not here, right? Now through the use of DNA, they have found that we didn't wipe them out. We bred with them.
Yeah.
And supposedly your average human has somewhere between 2 and 4% Neanderthal genes in them. I know a few people that I think have more. But fact of the matter is we were breeding with them. And
I kind of think that maybe we just, as humans, we have information in our DNA that lets us evolve, over time. Anyways, like, our skin color will get different and whatever. And the Neanderthals they were built a lot different because, hey, guess what? The Earth had an ice age. Humans needed to go that direction to survive, and I think evolution is a process, but not Darwinian evolution, that everything came from a sludge, a microbial sludge at the beginning of the dawn of time, and that grew legs. Monkey, fish, frog.
Yeah. I do believe that we are the design and the handiwork of the Lord Almighty. But did he make the world 6,000 years ago in 6 days? Like days that we know? I don't know.
No,
You know,
there's
the people, I don't know, there's a lot more going on than what we realize. There's a lot more going on. Things are becoming apparent, yeah.
there are really a lot of good scientific models that argue both cases. 6,000 years, according to time started just at the fall. If time started then everything lines up and all kinds of stuff. And
Well,
but the one thing is it doesn't really matter because the Hebrew word is yom, and yom can mean season or that day, or it's it's all how it's used in a sentence. Like 10 years from now, I can say, hey man, remember back in the day we went to those times when we were going and camping up there and having these Sasquatch videos and oh yeah, I remember. That's what yom can be used that way. But it, people believe what they want to believe, and that's fine.
well, I try to be respectful of other people's opinions because, who was it? I think it was, who was it that said that there are no experts? Might have been Meldrum. There are no real Sasquatch experts. Although that's arguable. Perhaps maybe the U.S. government has a few.
Yeah.
But nobody knows. So you kind of got to be respectful. I don't necessarily prescribe to the alien theory. I do not prescribe to the portal theories. I got some issues with some of that stuff, and maybe I say I'm not quite as open to some of that stuff as some of the other things, but people have the right to believe differently than me, and I will respect that because well, I don't know everything. I might be wrong. I've been wrong before, believe it or not. Now, granted, the time I was wrong before it was a situation where I was actually right, but I thought I was wrong. But it doesn't change the fact that I was actually wrong once. But, yeah, no, seriously. I get tired of all these people arguing and all this stuff. And it's like everybody's looking for a crusade to fight on the internet. Imagine what we could do if we pooled our resources and worked together and quit squabbling.
Quit making everything a cross to die on, or you have to. This is how it is, and I'm gonna.
Well, it amazes me how many people will sit there and argue tooth and nail over something that's just. There's no way they know for sure.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no way.
Especially the time thing, because in 1989, Scientific American put out an article saying the constants are changing. The speed of light is changing little by little, and it's different.
Uh-oh.
And so they're saying, well, that plus everything vibrates. We're a frequency, and it's saying that this is the shadow of a larger reality, and so a lot of things you just don't know. They're still trying to figure stuff out.
Well, this is what I've been wondering is Going back to the Bible, we know that the original Nephilim were angels or demons breeding with women and producing Nephilim. And the Bible mentions that they were men, mighty men of renown, but they lived and interacted with men on earth. Now what I'm asking is, were those Nephilim then able to interact and interbreed with either normal women or female Nephilim and produce offspring? And if that's been going on, 3,000 years and some inbreeding, and over the years they've gotten to be more animal-like, and maybe that's where we're at with these cryptids.
Like they've over time they've bred out the divine quality in them.
Now, I have heard, I can't remember where, but I have heard people talk about how every time a generation of Sasquatches or a generation passes, that they become less spiritually powerful, and that older Sasquatches, more pure blood Sasquatches, have higher abilities, like zapping people, infrasound, stuff like that. And that some of them have, higher abilities, and others, there might be something to that.
Yeah.
I would say that every time they deviate from what they're supposed to be doing or what God's plan was for them, I could see where maybe as a punishment their offspring would lose more, I guess you would say, gifts. I don't know. Possible. A lot of people say that Sasquatch can even, put an image and communicate to you telepathically.
Yeah, I think that happened to Brigham Young.
Who's that?
Brigham Young.
The name sounds familiar, but I'm drawing a blank.
The Mormon. It's either Brigham Young or Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith.
And one of them had the
vision.
The vision.
I read up on that many, many years ago, and I don't remember half of what I read. So I'm going to have to refrain from comment so I'm not being facetious. But I don't know. But I get where you're going with that. And inbreeding as a whole has been a problem, I guess you would say, or has had an impact on humans and animals alike throughout history. I mean, look at all the nobles and stuff of Europe in the Middle Ages. I mean, they were so afraid that they were going to lose power. They were breeding with their sisters, and
the Habsburgs.
Yeah, the children were so retarded looking. Sorry if that offends somebody, but yeah. I don't know the new politically correct term to use. But they're some of them were really bad. Like they couldn't come out in public.
Yeah, they couldn't feed themselves.
Yeah,
they were so deformed and all that. But
yeah.
You hear about Egyptians though. Egyptians, they kept it all in the family to have a pure bloodline, and I think some breeders do it with horses to keep a. So it's like sometimes it works.
There's impacts. I mean this tampering.
Well, inbreeding is not always negative if animal breeders manage it and breed for the animal they want. What I was wondering there was the Bible doesn't actually say Goliath was an Nephilim, but I believe that's maybe a good assumption. Did he then marry a normal woman babies, or would there be a female Nephilim that he would mate with?
Well,
And eventually, what I'm getting at is eventually maybe the Nephilim offspring got so animal-like that no human woman would breed with them then, and that's when the inbreeding really got bad.
well, I would say, and I may be wrong. I'm not an expert on inbreeding, but if that's true, and the inbreeding was making them more animalistic, and by animalistic, I think you're implying violent, perhaps. I
Well,
could see where they would
maybe
go
not that, but just more
more to a vestigial mode.
looking like an animal where they were obviously not a normal human being.
Well, and the other thing that I would make note of is that the Bible says that the Nephilim were giants, but the Bible does not say that the sons of God who bore them with regular women were. It doesn't say that they were giants. It just calls them sons of God. Now here's let's throw just basic physical size into the thing. What did they estimate that Goliath, how tall he was? I mean,
I don't remember exactly, but it was way above any normal man. It wasn't like he was a little bigger than the other guys. He was double a normal human.
I was under the impression he was like 15 feet tall.
Yeah.
Now, let's just get down to brass tacks here, and let's quit dancing around it. A 15-foot guy is going to have one hell of a schlong on him. And everybody says that, it doesn't matter how big it is, blah, blah, blah. But you're really pushing the envelope there when you take some young girl, normal size, and a 15-foot giant. I mean, you're really pushing that.
Well, maybe and maybe not. I do remember this from zoology. The great apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, whatnot, relative to their body size, their penises are very little, very small. Nowhere near what an adult male is on average.
And you knew that one day you'd be able to bring that up in the conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, granted, now this is speculation, but there have been a few people who have claimed to have close, like the lady with the Squatch fox and her grandfather, and they describe them as having huge genitalia. But I don't know. But here's another random thought. The Bible does not say anything about there being female Nephilim being reared.
That was going to be my next question. I don't remember that either. I've never read that there were any.
It doesn't mention that there were females.
But
Now,
there's female squatches.
Is that on purpose, or was that just coincidental?
Well, I don't know.
Because they would be mighty men, but the mighty women Nephilim would probably not be worth writing about because they were at home cleaning the mighty kitchen table and the mighty dishes.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know. There are no female angels mentioned in the Bible.
There's
well, now the angels have names.
Yes.
And the names,
there are different.
Their
There
names,
are different beings known as angels.
yes, and the angels have names, and their names have gender. But other than their names, does the Bible even say that that specific angels have a gender at all?
No, it's just that whenever they are named or whenever they appear in bodily form, it's always as a male.
And that's why, we talked last night about some things about, okay, well,
Whoa! I gotta get me one of them headlights.
their language, the Sasquatch language, and you're saying, what about the females? And there's more unanswered questions that, despite the fact of the whole Nephilim thing, not talking about Sasquatches to begin with, it's just there's the questions. You got questions that you're going to be just always going in circles trying to figure out how can I thread this into being a Nephilim, and it don't work. It doesn't work. I don't think. My opinion is that they're not Nephilim. They're different creatures that have been here for a while.
Well, I don't know what to think. I don't have the answers. But on the flip side, I do think that it is well, I'm not going to go there. I was going to say that I was going to touch on the DNA stuff, but the DNA stuff almost raises more questions than it gives answers about half the time. I respect the science, I respect the work that they do, but the truth is being held from us. I mean, these people know. I mean, hell, there are actually national forests and state parks where they actually put up signs that say that reference not feeding the Sasquatch or enter this area at your own risk. Sasquatch in the area. They're literally putting up signs, and I don't know. I'm just blown away by the level of denial. I think people. I'm kind of like. I think Steve brought this up, but Steve Ishtal. I think people have the right to know what's out there. People have the right to know if they're taking their kids to, Mount McKinley for a hike that day. I think they have the right to know what they may encounter, so they can make a judgment call on whether it's safe or not. But I don't know, they're just going to keep lying to us. Oh, goodness. I can't help but wonder if we just get up and go to bed, would they come on in or what?
Yeah, I'm for that.
There's a lot of fireflies out tonight. Or maybe they're orbs.
I got a story one time. My cousins and I, we were up in the Wind Rivers, and we would fish and trout fishing, and I was doing some fly fishing, and I had a hook come back and hit me in the shoulder. It was in real deep. I couldn't pull it out. I was trying to pull it out, and every time I pulled, you could see my muscles contract. And
Got a nerve.
so they pushed it through and cut it and pulled it out, And of course, there might have been alcohol involved. And we're up on the side of we decided we need to throw up camp. We're along the river, and there's no flat ground. We kind of hike up the ground a little ways and find somewhere halfway decent that was flat. We build a fire and cooking our trout with red potatoes and butter flavored Crisco, and we shine the light.
Butter flavored Crisco.
Yeah.
That brings back flashbacks.
And so we're shining light on camp, and we see eyes, and their eye shine, and it was, Sasquatch wasn't even on our minds back then, but the eyes were just real wide, and we thought, oh my gosh, that's a mountain lion.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, it was another one popped up, and they're like bobbing up and down, looking, bobbing.
Well, they say the bobbing is a sign that this is something that the Squatches do.
And then come to find out, so we're all scared, drinking, and we finally look, and there's huge coons, man, huge raccoons. But they were coming up because we were throwing our fish out there. But anyways, we all hopped in this little pup tent. I had 3 of us, and next morning I wake up and we didn't realize what much of an incline we were on, because like I said, we'd been drinking a little bit. And I woke up.
It's amazing what a little alcohol does.
I woke up and everybody had slid out the tent. It was good times. Had by all.
I woke up on top of a picnic table one time. One of those concrete ones at the state park. It was comfortable. I'll tell you a Sasquatch story I haven't told you before. I've always been amazed at, how people can experience things, situations that are not answerable by normal, just normal happenings. And they can experience this phenomenon, like we was talking about earlier, about how that scenario with the light, and I'm not going to get into that now, but I think I may have talked, I don't know if we were talking about that on tape or not, but, and how I remember the situation, and I remember it as being a extremely unusual situation. My brother remembers it, but he doesn't remember it as a big deal, which I do not understand, but that's his choice. But the third guy who was actually present in that situation, he does not remember it at all. And how in the hell you cannot remember something like that happening to you, I will never know, but that's a different story. But I'm always amazed at how people remember things and how they categorize them in their little pigeonhole brains. But you forget things sometimes too. But the other day, I was actually thinking about and remembering, my time when I was a young kid, and I would go and spend the summers and like my Christmas vacation and Thanksgiving vacation and whatnot, spring break with my grandma and Grandpa Terrell down at the farm. And, those were some of my funnest times. I really liked it there and the freedom that I had, whenever I was there. But long story short, I was dwelling on that, and I was thinking about, how great it was being a kid back then, even though we didn't have Facebook and Snapchats and Instagrams, and I kind of was laughing, and then I remembered, I was thinking about all the tree houses that I built as a kid, and how big a deal tree houses were, and I was kind of dwelling on this, and then all of a sudden I remembered this situation that happened that was extremely peculiar. I have no idea how old I was. I am not gonna lie. I'm gonna say somewhere between 10 and 13. And we had this tree
that was probably about 150 yards from the barn, that was like in between the barn and the spring. And this tree kind of sat out by itself. It was kind of away from some of the other trees. But it was kind of a cool tree because it was one of those trees that there was like 4 or 5. It was a blackjack tree, I remember that. But it was really big, and there was like 4 or 5 of them, and they kind of went up and they spread out in different directions. And I decided I'm going to build me a tree house in there. So the rule is that I could have any old junk wood that I found, and I could have any nails that I found, as long as they were bent and I straightened them up, I could have them. And so I went over there and started straightening nails and gathering up wood and whatnot. And I was in the process of building this, and I want to say that this tree house took me 3 days to build. And I remember I was almost done. It was like the second day, and I had a couple of things that I wanted to finish up and do, and I was still working on the pulley. I had this pulleys thing where you could put something in a bucket and raise it up to the fort and everything, and you know how all the Hardy Boys had all that cool stuff. And so I grabbed my stuff and some of the tools, because Grandpa would have beat my butt if I left the tools down there at the playhouse. And so I was carrying the tools back down there, and I get there, and my tree house is destroyed. Like, literally, like all the boards are ripped out of the trees. Now, granted, they weren't put in there with drywall screws or anything. It was all put in there with 16-penny nails that had been straightened out with a hammer, and they were not even the ribbed nails. They were smooth nails, you know. But somebody had gotten up there and ripped this treehouse contraption completely out. And there were boards that were broken, and there was literally like just a pile of stuff that was strung all around the base of this tree. And I immediately thought that my grandpa did it. And I was like, he must be really mad at me for something. And I was sitting here thinking, did I take any of the good wood, you know? Did I take some wood that I wasn't supposed to take? And I was kind of looking at the wood, and I was like, no, this is all crap wood. And I just didn't get it. I just didn't understand why he would do that, because he knew I was actually working on this thing. So I kind of picked up some stuff, and I was like, well, I guess I better go back to the house. And I figured I probably had, you know, either one hell of an ass chewing or a beating coming. And so I go back up to the house, kind of expecting the worst, and he wasn't mad. Everything was normal. And for several hours, I didn't talk about it, because I really thought that he was like going to go, surprise, I'm really mad, or something stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. I was a kid. But I asked him, finally, when I finally figured out he really wasn't mad, I asked him, I was like, why did you tear my treehouse up? And he said, I didn't tear your treehouse up. And I was like, my treehouse that I was building in between the barn and the spring, yeah? You didn't tear that up? No. He's like, what are you talking about? Well, he literally did not know anything about what I was talking about. And in my mind, I guess, my young mind, I just rationalized it that somebody had snuck down there. I remember thinking that it might have been Jim Perdue, our neighbor, you know. And I just, to this day, I don't know what did it. Now that I look back on it, I have, you know, an idea of what it might have been that would have gone in there and tore that up. But I don't know. I'll never know the truth about that. I'm not going to come out and say that was the big man that did that. He was mad or something, but who knows? who knows what that was, but I remember that plane. I'll never forget walking back down there. Well, apparently I did forget it because for a long time it just wasn't something I thought about. But then the other day I was thinking about that and that memory came back and I was just like, wow, I think I know what that was finally. Kind of weird. I don't know. It is amazing though what people forget.
I, you were sitting there talking about the Hardy Boys, and I read all of them.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell you now what any one of those books was about.
Oh, me neither. You know, I love the Hardy Boys so much that when I finished all of them, and I don't remember how many there was, but there was a lot. I was so heartbroken that I was done that I actually read all the Nancy Drews. And you know, I actually enjoyed the Nancy Drew books. I think there were more Nancy Drews than there were.
Well, and weren't they both written by the same author
I don't know.
with a different name?
That could be. I don't know who even wrote them. You're probably right, because you know they read the same.
Yeah.
So I always liked the fact that the Hardy Boys had their secret clubhouse in the junkyard, and it had like escape tunnels and all this stuff. I always thought that was cool. I was totally into tree houses and forts and clubs and secret tunnels and all that. Nowadays, kids, all they care about is how many likes they get or followers they get. I don't know. But you know, the weird part about that story, it's kind of related, kind of not. I honestly believe that my grandfather didn't know anything about any type of cryptid Sasquatch activity on the farm. I honestly believe that if he would have known that there was a possibility that there was something out there, he would never have given me the freedom to run around that farm by myself. You know, in the beginning it was wooden spears and wooden swords, and later on it was the 410 shotgun or maybe the 22 pump. You know, I was literally running through the woods playing all day, well, after the chores were done. You know, all summer long, every day by myself. And it's so crazy.
That's yours. 7354.
Nope, that's not me. I don't know where you got that.
Well,
It's one of your other.
I guess I didn't put you in.
Well, once we get somewhere where there's a cell phone signal, I'll call you so you have my number. But, and you know, speaking of which, you know, my dad knows that I'm into this cryptid stuff, and he makes fun of me. He thinks it's hilarious. And I asked him one time if he'd ever seen anything, you know, when he was a kid growing up. And yeah, that's me. But he told me pretty much straight faced that he had never seen anything supernatural, weird, Sasquatchy or anything the whole time he was growing up on that farm. And I know he was telling me the truth, but I can't help but wonder, did he experience a lot of stuff growing up and just didn't know it? Doesn't remember, you know? Kind of like,
You know, the third guy that was at that farm that one time when the light came down, he doesn't even remember it, you know. Has he blocked it out? Did he interpret it a different way? Or did he not interpret whatever it was as a big deal? You know, I clearly, without a doubt, I clearly remember those nights when the cattle would be up in the corral bawling all night long for 2 or 3 nights. And it was almost like you couldn't beat them out of that corral with a hot shot, even during the daytime. I can remember having to put feed out for them because they wasn't going to leave the damn corral. And now looking back on that, I know what that was. But my grandpa and my dad had no problems whatsoever letting me run around down there as a kid. You know, 160 acres of, well, have I ever taken you out there? To my Grandma Terrell's? In between Dover and Crescent?
Not that I know of.
Yeah. It's probably the deepest, heavily wooded farm we've got. It's pretty... It's got some places that are so gnarly with tangleweed and thorny vine and trees that I can honestly say I would not want to go in there with a machete. Something could live in there very easily and never be discovered. I mean, I have no intentions of getting that many puncture wounds in my body just to go in there and get that. Honestly, the place needs a good fire. Hate to say that, but it does. Well. Kids. I do think it's interesting, though, that people report kids seeing the Squatches and becoming aware of them first. Of course, people say that kids talk to ghosts, too. Isn't that interesting? I've watched a lot of, like, Sasquatch Chronicles and stuff where...
Well, you heard them where they... I've heard that, you know, they can tell if you're of good nature and stuff, and before they want you to see, they allow you to see them, and, you know, of course, kids are pretty pure and innocent, you know.
Well, and a lot of kids are not going to be nearly as judgmental as, you know, so I guess I could see that. And maybe they do have the ability to communicate telepathically. Of course, I'm kind of weird. I've told Micah this. You've probably never heard this before, but I have a weird theory that humans could speak to each other telepathically prior to the Tower of Babel in the Bible. And that when God mixed up their speech, that was him basically taking away their ability to read each other's minds. But that's a weird story for another day. But nobody can disprove me.
So it must be true.
You want to turn that off for me? Okay, here's a short video of all the treats. As you can see, there's a little deal of butter, about a half a stick. Here's the treat. We left the, oh yeah, there you go. That's actually really good stuff, but, and we're gonna leave the handle in there so it's even more, here you go. If they're gonna get into that, they're gonna have a hard time. Now, how are we going to, I'll just throw something like that up there, or something less noticeable. Possibly, that should work.
Wait a second.
Oh yeah, stick a stick in there. Okay, it's documented. We'll let you know if there's a change in the morning. Yeah. You know, I've always been amazed at the people that are so strictly against marijuana usage. And I think it really goes back to all that propaganda that was done in the 50s. You know, they actually, I mean, and you know, I'm a couple years older than you, but when I was in Enid High, they actually made me watch that movie, that black and white movie where the kid smokes a joint and he goes out and chops his family up with an axe.
Yeah. Reefer Madness.
Yeah. But, you know, I graduated from Enid High in 1990, and they made me watch that. And, of course, they also made us watch those, in driver's ed, they made us watch those burn victims movie. And yeah. Of course, I think that was good. But yeah, there's a lot of propaganda. But, you know, if given a choice, I mean, and I'm not a drug user of any type. Well, other than my
Coffee.
This is
The most widely used drug in the world.
Coffee, yeah. And I do drink a lot of that, but you know, I try not to be opinionated, but if I had a choice of having my kids go out and get shit-faced drunk and drive a vehicle or get high as hell and go drive a vehicle, I would much rather them get high. So that's just me, that's my opinion. I just find it fascinating that the mainstream has somehow deemed alcohol okay. Now that's changing now, but I mean, I'm talking like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Alcohol was perfectly fine. You know, borderline considered a rite of passage for young men, you know, but marijuana, not so much. So, but anyway, we could talk about that till the cows come home.
It has its purposes. I mean, I was in Maine, and you know, all these years I'd been on the antidepressants and whatever. And I at that time when I was up in Maine, had taken another pill that helped me the transition from getting off those pills, you know. And
that's when you know it's a little much,
yeah,
right?
and the guy was like, you know, the guy next to me, he was in the hotel room next to me. He was like, you know, brother, you need to come over here and smoke this, you know. I was like, no, man, no. Well, probably about 3 or 4 days after, where my anxiety, panic attack, whatever it was, wasn't going away, you know, I would have ate
Me neither. Remember those beautiful bluebirds we saw at Black Mesa? Yeah, they're shiny.
Yeah, that's what this was. They're little. Right.
Water's kind of deep. Undercarriage wash.